It's the Diamond Radeon HD 7970, and this card is pretty much based on the stock. It's not the gigahertz edition, it's the regular edition at 925 megahertz. So let's just go and talk about the specs. First off, it's a PCI Express 3.0 card. It's a monster, it's fast, and it gets hot. 925 megahertz core clock. We have 3072 megabytes of GDDR5, and that is clocked at 1375, and it's pretty easy to overclock that as well. The memory you can really push on this. The memory bandwidth as it is 264 gigabytes per second. As far as the ins and outs on this card, we have a dual link DVI on this. We have an HDMI, and we have 2 mini display ports. We also have some adapters in the box, and it's kind of cool if they've included that. They included a DVI to VGA. They also have an active display port to DVI adapter and an HDMI to DVI adapter. Do not fear a lot of people saying like the quality of HDMI is terrible. HDMI 1.4 looks totally fine. It's a pure digital signal, and if you're switching from that to DVI, you can run extra monitors with DVI, no problem. So no worries there. Everything looks great. Now, I mean, we're not going to be dwelling on this too much. The card's loud, it's hot, but it's really, really fast, and you can overclock it. So let's just jump right in to the benchmarks, and then we'll also talk about the temperatures after the benchmarks. So before I get started with the benchmarks, I benchmarked everything at 1920 by 1200. I did it at the stock clock of 925, but I also did an overclock. I clocked it up to 1025, and I brought the memory all the way up to 1600 megahertz. So that's a very moderate overclock. Any of you guys can do it. It's about the same clock speed as the gigahertz edition. So with that, if you just, very, very simple. I mean, just drag a few things and you can overclock it. So I wanted to do something that was indicative of just like something anybody could do. So moving right along here, I started off with Black Mesa Source at 1920 by 1200. Everything at max, all the filters at max. At the stock clock, 271.76 frames per second. I didn't even overclock it with that one because it was like, who cares? It's already running so fast. Minecraft. Everybody keeps asking for Minecraft, so we're going to do a Minecraft benchmark. Everything on the highest possible settings. And what was it? What world was that we were on, Max? I don't play Minecraft, so I don't know. What were we on? You said generating.
Maximum biomes.
Yeah, biomes. Yeah, maximum biomes. So a lot of stuff going on. The stock clock, we got 70.8 frames per second. And at with the overclock at 1025 megahertz, we got 85.28 frames per second. That's a big jump for, just a 100 megahertz overclock, but hey, I'll take it. Skyrim, we tried that at 1920 by 1200. Everything on max, and I have tons of mods. I have texture mods. I have the 2K texture pack. I have the official texture pack. I have mods on Steam, and I also have mods from the Nexus. So here's a list of my mods on the screen now. Please don't comment on the male nude mod. Everyone always comments on the male nude mod. I'm like, you know what? I like realism. If I'm gonna have a female naked, I'm gonna have a male naked. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And killable children. It's like the real world. And they can't put that in the game, but never mind. Let's just talk about the freaking benchmark. Yeah. At the stock clock, at that resolution with everything on max, 90 frames per second. Overclocked to 1025, 99 frames per second. We also played Skyrim at in Infinity at 5760 by 1050. One of these cards, 3 monitors. Here's what we got. Stock clock, 51 frames a second. At 1025 megahertz, 59 frames per second. And you know what? I decided that I wanted to go higher than 60 frames per second. So like an idiot, I clocked it all the way up to 1070, and I got 60 frames per second on the dot. The problem with that is it was running at 85 degrees Celsius, and I only played the game for about 15 minutes. It didn't crash, but it was probably going to melt my card. You don't want to play games with this thing in the 80s. I mean, it runs in the high 70s, but if you're going to be running in the 80s, this thing ain't going to last long. It ain't going to last long at all, and it's going to hate you. You're going to wake up one night and it's going to be standing by the bed going like, why did you overclock me so high? It gets so hot in there. It gets so fucking hot. I'm going to kill you. That's what will happen. Crysis 2, 1920 by 1200 max. I've got the high-res textures and the DirectX 11 patch. The stock clock, 55.2 frames per second, and clocked at 1025 megahertz, 62.28 frames per second. Running Crysis 2 at 5760 by 1050, Infinity 3 monitors. Stock clock 26.32 at 1025 megahertz, 27.04. You guys requested Battlefield 3. I got a copy of Battlefield 3 for $10. Yep. They were doing that at like Toys R Us, and so we like went in and made people at Walmart price match, and yeah, we got. So anyway, Battlefield 3, 1920 by 1200, everything on max. Stock clock, 59.28 frames per second. Clocked at 1025, 69.36 frames per second. Running an iFinity, 5760 by 1050, 35.96 frames per second. Clocked at 1025 megahertz, 40.43 frames per second. I brought out Trine 2 because Trine 2 supports iFinity, and I wanted to have some fun with 3 monitors. First off, one monitor, 1920 by 1200. Stock clock, 53 frames per second. Trine is a monster. It's an absolute monster. Clocked at 1025 megahertz, 62 frames per second. 5760 by 1050, 3 monitors. Stock clock, 26.92 frames per second. Overclocked to 1025 megahertz, 29.16 frames per second. You couldn't even get 30 frames per second on Trine. It's a 2D game. That game is ridiculous. It's way too high res. Metro 2033, 1920 by 1200, tessellation, DirectX 11, everything on max. Stock clock, 42.8 frames per second. Yeah, 1025 megahertz, 53 frames per second. iFinity, 5760 by 1050. Stock clock, 20 frames per second. 1025 megahertz, 23 frames per second. So you can see there I can play most games in iFinity. I was having a little trouble with Metro and having a little bit of trouble with Crysis 2 in the iFinity, but it came so close to being playable. One thing I do want to mention, you can totally play this, get one of these and play Metro 2033 or Crysis in iFinity if you turn down just a couple of the features. With this one, I turned off DirectX 11 and tessellation, and it still looks really good, but it is totally a lot more playable. So just take that into account, and also take this into account. It's freaking loud. We're talking like ridiculously loud. At idle, the thing runs hot. It was like getting around 60 degrees on idle sometimes. I had to take the side panel of the case off. I need to put some more fans in there, but still getting close to, idle is 56 degrees Celsius. That's crazy. And at idle, it's about 46 decibels. So not terrible, but not good. Now, when you're in game and the fan ramps up to like 80 or 90%, it's going to be 65 to 70 decibels. It got close to 70 decibels when I took the side panel off to measure it then. But yeah, 65 decibels, guys. So it can sound like a vacuum cleaner, when especially this one, because I've got it in there. It's up on the desk. It's just freaking loud, really loud. If you're going to be playing with headphones, get some noise canceling headphones. If you got the speakers on, I couldn't hear anything they were saying in Trine. It was just a loud card. I'm going to look into an alternate cooling method because the card is hot and loud, but it's also so freaking fast for the money. Let's talk about heat. At idle, I was getting 56 Celsius. Full load on the stock clock, 72 degrees Celsius. And at 1025 megahertz, I was at 78 degrees Celsius, getting close to the 80 degrees. I like to keep it in the 70s if possible. And when I brought it all the way up to 1070, it got up to 85 degrees Celsius, and that is too hot for me. So I'm going to keep it at the 1025 point, overclocked a little bit, memory at 1600. And I also want to mention that I only had to add 2% extra power to this thing, and it ran just fine. I'm going to try it with like 1% extra power. It doesn't really need that much extra power to get the extra gigahertz, so easy to overclock, but it gets hot. That's where it is. The thing's extremely fast. If you're looking for something that's like in this price range, $350, you're not going to be able to spend $350 and get anything that's going to be able to push games as much as this one does. Just take everything into account, the heat and the noise, and then check out the benchmarks and make your decision. I'm happy with it, but I am going to look for an alternate fan because, yeah. I mean, it's freaking loud, isn't it, Max?
Oh, yeah. Way too loud.
Yeah. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, inbox at techsyndicate.com. Send me ideas, send me comments. Tell me how much, you love or hate something. I don't care. Tell me a story. Sometimes I just like to read emails. I can't respond to all of them because there's a lot, but I do look at every single email, guys. So you guys are reaching me. All right, I'll see you guys next time.